big voice guy joining us here on Kyle Brust and Ortman across ESPN Wisconsin is Jason Wilde. Listen to Jason 9 to noon across these various stations on Wilde and 𝙍𝙍. Jason, how are you?
I'm great, guys. How are you?
We are bobbing and weaving through the active free agency today. The Packers finally landed a punch in Aaron Banks, the guard from San Francisco. 4 years, $77 million. It's one of those things where, you know, the game is won in the trenches. That's a lot of money. Now, my question to you is, the only thing I can ponder as to what I maybe would have done differently, because it's hard to complain about bolstering your offensive line, which didn't have the greatest second half of the season for the Packers, is I feel like they're really good at drafting linemen. And so maybe utilizing that money elsewhere, or is it just, hey, the way the season ended, we need to get better? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think they're definitely not deep enough for one, but remember, all these moves are not just made with 1 year in mind. So not only are they watching Josh Myers walk out the door, as Bill Huber reported, but 3 of the other 4 remaining starters are free agents next year: Sean Rhyan, Zach Tom, Rasheed Walker. And, you know, I don't know what 2025 will bring. I don't know if Rasheed Walker will play at a ultra high level that will make him worth re-signing, but they're definitely not going to pay him top of market left tackle money. I don't know if Sean Rhyan will continue his ascent, because he went from being a first-year total bust who got himself suspended for performance-enhancing substances that did not apparently enhance his performance, to being a solid starter and a guy that they like. And then obviously Zach Tom, you know, he did not have the season he expected to or wanted to. I think the torn pec really affected him, but, you know, he's the one of those 3 that I would think will get extended out of the 3. So you've got a lot of decisions there, and you also have to figure out where you're going to play Jordan Morgan. So this signing obviously means that somebody is moving to center. I think it's probably Elton Jenkins. It could be Sean Rhyan. But they're thinking both short-term and long-term. When you give a guy $63 million out of the $77 in the first 3 years of the deal, you are paying premium dollars, and they clearly didn't feel like their offensive line was good enough last year if they were willing to invest to this degree at a not sexy but certainly important position.
Yeah, Jason, just hitting the Twitter X world. Spotrac just tweeted, former Niners guard Aaron Banks agreed to a 4-year...
That's you, Jason, or the dog?
That was a butterfly that flew by the window. We needed to bark at it. So.
Those butterflies will get you on a beautiful day like this. 4-year, $77 million contract for the Packers for Aaron Banks, but only the signing bonus is guaranteed at signing. Certainly the Green Bay Packer way, as they described it. And speaking of the Green Bay Packer...
How big is the signing bonus?
Would have gave it if we had it.
Did not say. Speaking of the Green Bay Packer way...
$63 million.
Going young is Goody's MO right now, and that seemed to preclude Davante Adams from finding his way back to the green and gold. Now, you wrote an unbelievable article on Channel 3000. Check out Jason Wilde and all of his new writings on Channel 3000. But describe for our listeners what you know about the Davante Adams situations. I want to know, were you surprised that the Green Bay Packers never even reached out? And if you know... was anyone in the Davante Adams camp surprised that they didn't even reach out, if you even know that?
Yeah, I think Davante Adams was definitely surprised that they didn't reach out at all.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Probably a little disappointed. I would also say that, you know, I think we've been kind of shampooed and conditioned in this idea that a 32-year-old player is old. And that's just not true. Just Goody thinks that. Like, obviously, the fine people of the Los Angeles Rams don't think that's old, because you don't give $46 million with 26 of it guaranteed to a guy that you think is old and on the verge of being washed. So, and they moved on from a guy who I think is technically chronologically younger, but has had injury issues, and that's Cooper Kupp. So, you know, look, this is how 𝙬𝙀 is. The thing about it is, I don't think we should have been surprised, but I will admit that I was. I always thought that it made way more sense than DK Metcalf, and then there were the reports that indicated the Packers were in on Metcalf. Now, I talked to two people that I don't think lied to me, who said that the Packers never made an offer. They never pursued DK Metcalf. Now, is it possible that that's a little bit of revisionist history because they were not the team that got him, and you don't want the guys that are in your wide receiver room thinking you pursued a new number one wide receiver and now you didn't get him? I suppose that's possible, but I never thought DK Metcalf kind of fit the suit either. Like he's certainly a downfield threat, but he also seems very much like a me guy from what I have gathered. And in Seattle, he obviously was very productive, but he didn't strike me as a guy that I wanted to give $150 million to if I was 𝙬𝙀. So that made way more sense to me that they were out on him. I just don't get the Davante piece. I really don't. I thought it made a lot of sense. Now, I don't think they were interested in, $23 million a year. Maybe they were interested at 20, but they weren't interested at all. That's the bottom line, and that was my frustration about talking about this. And I know
I just brought this up, Jason. I was like, for all the last 2 weeks that this has been happening, and Davante being open to being with the Packers, I was like, I'm pretty sure Jason came on these airwaves and just wanted to find out if there was just anything going on, so we couldn't waste your time, our fans' time, and here we are. As day one comes around, we find out that they didn't even reach out. It's blasphemy.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I said multiple times, it doesn't matter what the four of us think, or the five of us, still think. What matters is what 𝙬𝙀 thinks, and the fact that he never entertained this idea. It was never something that he was ever interested in, because the guy's been released for 2 weeks. He's been out there. There was not even a single call to Frank Bauer, his agent, to say, hey, with Davante, he seems like he's interested in coming back based on what he says on 𝘍𝙔𝙇𝙀 podcast. Is that something he's interested in? Do we want to talk about this? And that obviously never happened. So this was a non-starter for 𝙬𝙀. The fact that he never talked to him tells you that he was never interested in a reunion.
Yeah, so, Jason,
wild.
What bothers me about this is the fact that two things is that you may end up having to face Davante Adams in a game that really matters in the playoffs, and he may torch you based off the way that your cornerback room is currently made up. But what about 𝙬𝙀 makes him believe that he's smarter than a Les Snead who's won a Super Bowl?
I just don't think he thinks Davante Adams at this point in his career is worth that kind of money, and he would rather continue to let his young guys grow and cross his fingers and hope that the development that did not. Yeah, it's not.
That's not a strategy.
Sorry, Jason. Kyle's in many stages of the grief cycle.
In his mind, it's not crossing his fingers. In my mind, it is. Right? You're hoping that two guys in Jayden Reed and Dontavion Wicks, who did not make the jump you wanted them to make in year two and dropped a ridiculous number of passes. They dropped more passes between the two of them, more than double the number of passes that were dropped by the entire Philadelphia Eagles roster. Eagles dropped 7 passes all season. Those two guys dropped 19 combined.
Ooh. So, better than drops a guy that going to catch that football and be an impact player. But I mean, I'm preaching to the choir.
But he's old. He's old in 𝙬𝙀's mind. 32 is old. So
he would have led your team receiver last year.
Right.
In just the 11 games, as Jason said, with the Jets.
And also, I had a couple of conversations with different people yesterday, including one in the building, who said that he never thought that they really recovered from moving on from Davante. You think about what they did, and you guys have heard me go through the lineage time and time again of how one guy would be the number one, and then another guy would move past him, right? Whether it was Davante with Jordy or Jordy with Greg Jennings. And then after they traded him to the Raiders, I mean, my goodness, Allen Lazard was your number one receiver. Come on. We all like Allen Lazard. We love the way he blocks. But there was no reason for him to be a number one receiver on a team with Aaron Rodgers on it. And 2022 went the way it did because they had him and 3 rookies at the top of their rotation at that position.
Oh, Jason, this is my last comment on this. When you're talking about the history, right? Historically, for Goody to be around this organization for so long, he's seen that transition.
And to preach history at the Combine about the way they've drafted for 30 years on defense.
But wide receiver-wise, they used to do so well because they had James Jones, they had Jordy Nelson, they had Greg Jennings, they had Davante Adams, they had Donald Driver. Like they've had
packed rooms.
They've had guys that have been around for an extended period. So he knows what talent looks like. So it's disappointing. But I do want to know, Jason, would improvement through the draft be enough to make this team a Super Bowl contender next year?
First of all, they added a guard. Come on, man.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited about the guard, but we still know adding this.
No, you love a guard.
No one's excited about a guard.
No, I like big boys. I like them. I like them big. But
I cannot lie. Yeah.
Nice.
Look, I don't know what they're going to do in the draft. I still think that there are, and Tausch loves to tease me about this, but if you're smart about your bargain signings, they can be impactful players for you. And they don't have to be Zach Bond. But I always bring up these examples. Think back to Goody's tenure so far. He got Devondre Campbell. Now, he should have never re-signed Devondre Campbell and given him a 5-year, $50 million deal at the time. But he got him in June of 2021 for 1 year, $2 million. And the guy goes and he's a first-team All-Pro. He got Keyshawn Nixon for nothing, like the veteran minimum. And he went from a nobody to a all-pro kick returner to a top-flight slot corner to a guy that could be, if they don't add, a number one corner. Whether or not you want him to be the number one corner, I get it, but he's at least capable of being in that conversation. And then you mentioned Rasul Douglas, who is 29 years old, but he's going to turn 30 during 2025, so I assume that eliminates him from coming back as well. But they plucked him off of a practice squad, and he ended up, he had more picks than anybody during his time with the Packers. He
single-handedly won that Cardinals game.
Exactly. So, again, there's just because they don't make any big signings other than a big guard signing, and Kyle likes big boys and he cannot lie, that doesn't mean that they can't get guys that are going to help them and that they can't be in a Super Bowl. But they do need to continue. They've had some really good draft classes. Let's give Goody his flowers.
Yep.
But they need to have another good draft class, and then they need these guys that didn't make the biggest jumps to make really big jumps. They need, they moved on today from TJ Slayton. He's signed with the Bengals. Well, that means Devontae Wyatt better do a heck of a lot more than he's done to this point. They need Quay Walker to elevate his game like he was before he got hurt in Seattle and play at a really high level this season. Like, they need to improve from within if they want to be a Super Bowl team, because clearly they are not adding at a lot of positions that we all identify as needs.
Yes, as Jason Wilde joins us here on Kyle Brust and Ortman across ESPN Wisconsin. Jason, quickly before we let you go, I think it's just interesting seeing Carlton Davis leave Detroit and then DJ Reed sign. Obviously, the Bears are finally doing something in which they're investing in the offensive line. Whether it works for not or them, they're doing something. As I look at the Packers and I hear Rob Demovsky on Wilde and Tausch talk about how he's, hearing from different agents that it sounds like the Packers are going to be in the mix with different players and, they're inquiring. And then to not inquire about Davante Adams and the first signing to be a guard, is this just the moment that I need to remember? Because I'm like you, I'm saying this is my fault. Been doing this long enough to know that it was 2019 and then it took 5 years later. I just think because of McKinney and Jacobs last year and being top 15 in cap space, there was an idea of, after Rob said that and Davante, that there was going to be some needs of cornerback, edge, and wide receiver being addressed in free agency that we just never know when it comes to what Goody's thinking.
We don't, and that's obviously by design for him. But I would add a couple things. First of all, let's, again, there's a lot of ball game left, as good old Aaron Nagler likes to say. Secondly, Goody told us a lot of these things ahead of time. If you look at what he said after the season and at the scouting combine, one of the things he pointed out is that it's great that they have cap space, but they've got guys that they want to keep. And those guys cost money too. Just because they're not outside free agents doesn't mean they don't cost money against the cap to keep them, right? And Zach Tom is on that list. He's got to be next, right? They're going to invest in him. Again, we haven't seen all the specifics of this deal, but they've spent a lot on an offensive lineman. That is not something that you would have expected them to do. So they were a player, just no one thought that Aaron Banks, the number one guard on the board, was going to end up in Green Bay. I saw the Chiefs were expected to go after him. I saw the Vikings were expected to go after him, and instead the Packers got him. They made him their Xavier McKinney level priority today, and they got him. And now they've got some options on their offensive line. But there's no doubt there's more work to be done. But anybody who took last year as, this is the new era of the Goody regime, and he's going to be a big spender in free agency every year. I mean, he also said at the Combine that this year's free agency class is there's not the same kind of players that there were last year. So he said all these things. So if you're disappointed today with Aaron Banks, which is that the kid that joins the Mighty Ducks that was playing
Adam
for
Banks.
the other team? Oh, Adam Banks. Close. His brother.
He's big like Philip Banks.
Nice.
Great reference. I love the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So what I'm saying is that you shouldn't be surprised that Goody's basically had two really big free agency years, 19 and last year. And we'll see who else he adds besides Aaron, don't call me Adam Banks.
A lot of ball game left, as Jason said. Jason, we appreciate the time, and we'll listen to you on Wilde and Tausch, 9 to noon across these very stations.
All right, guys. Take care. Be good.
That was Jason Wilde. Quid pro quo for the Green Bay Packers.
Can I just say, there's guys, as I see these names, there's guys that, we don't know everybody in NFL. NFL's throwing a lot of money around. Brad, you got to be serious.
The cap went up, man.
Don't even start.
Super Bowl runner-up Brad Nortman here with us. This is Kyle Bruston Nortman, who second place Brad is famous for being jealous of all these specialist contracts out there.
I am. I'm seeing a couple punter contracts come through the line and say, what? This guy's getting that. That used to be top of the market. Now it's just average deals. But you're right. It also goes to show for the Green Bay Packers, right? The cap is going up almost exponentially each year. So there's money to be spent. So I think that's where Packer fans get a little frustrated. You see all these other guys making money, guys you never even heard of making a bunch of money. So I think you just like to see the Packers make that splash. I just wish I would have played 10 years later.
Are we going to get, and I heard this on Jen, Gabe, and Chewy, are we going to get Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love in Ireland on Ben Brust's report of September 28th?
Now that would be poetic.
I think you got to go.
Oh, for sure. Next.